happening. You're trying to figure out ultimately what is.
It's still a mystery as to why it took them. Hey everyone, I'm Lauren Conlin. Hello to Jarrett Ferrantino, my favorite former homicide prosecutor. How are you?
I'm well. Hello, Lauren Conlin, my favorite pop crime reporter.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
well.
Thank you.
Then I'm busy being a lawyer. I don't know.
That's no fun.
It doesn't look like work to some people, but you know.
Yeah, no, we didn't have a chance to go live last week. We were planning on it, and then, I was traveling and Jarrett was really busy being a lawyer. So here we are today. Let me just check the chat. Hey, Sue. Hey, Jody. Good to see you all. I know there's a lot going on right now, and we wanted to jump on to discuss. Obviously, we should start with Karen Read because jury selection started today. Hey, Sinead. Hey, Hawkeyes. Good to see you. And I mean, I've been kind of flipping back and forth. It's not super entertaining, but I think just from being a recent juror, I'm very fascinated by all of this, and especially with some of the more recent filings that we've kind of seen. Like, I don't know if you saw this yesterday, Jarrett, but the jurors are, and you can kind of guide me through this, but it looks like the jurors are not going to be allowed to be described by any reporters or media. And I'm not sure if that means their reactions or, the emotion on their face, or if they mean, the blonde girl in the pink sweater.
I think I think they're going quite a ways to avoid identifying jurors publicly. So they're going to avoid publicly describing anything that would identify who jurors are individually, because they want to avoid any problems. And I was watching a show we both are a part of on occasion. Vinny had his podcast on, and he said something that I often agree with him, but I disagree with him on this point. He said, this is not a mob trial. Nobody's going to hurt these jurors. And I get that Karen Read isn't necessarily a threat. And I think he might have been making that point because their identities are going to be known to the defense and prosecution teams. What he did not account for is some of the fanfare and the zealots out there that both support Karen Read and support the prosecution. So you just never know who's out there. You could have some nut who wants to put this on a particular juror or wants to influence a particular juror, and that's obviously a problem. So the sanctity of whoever ends up on that jury is a huge issue. That's number one in our system.
And, there's a lot of drama with this case, of course, and I might have missed something, but I mean, I didn't think that any jurors necessarily got doxxed or got harassed after the first trial. I mean, we saw a juror came forward and was interviewed by Turtle Boy. I thought that was really eye-opening to hear what this juror said. And then we saw an alternate juror join the defense team. So
which is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I guess I'm confused where I'm like, so what? I mean, I get it. I do get it. But it's kind of like, I want to be able to, see a tweet from Ted Daniel, or whoever saying, this is what the jury looked like when so-and-so was on the stand. I don't think that's too much to ask.
No, I don't. I think you're still going to get that reaction description. I think where there's going to be a problem is describing anybody that would ultimately identify who they are. That's where I think it's a problem. And again, I think it's because this retrial is going to be way bigger than trial one, way bigger. Yeah. So oftentimes the sequels aren't as big. So this one's going to be bigger. Those charges against Turtle Boy right now for witness intimidation, I don't know where they're going. I think they're going to have some issues with those charges on First Amendment grounds and things of that nature. But that kind of behavior that has kind of been in the orbit of the Karen Read process and trial is probably what's giving the judge and everybody involved pause in identifying jurors. The last thing you want is to have a chilling effect on people to serve on juries. It's hard enough. So, in this process, I would imagine this jury selection is going to take into the third week at a minimum because of how big this case has been. And we should talk a little bit about that. I've been involved in the selection of juries that have taken almost that long, and why and what that means.
Yeah, and just going back for a minute, look, I agree with you. And Kirk Nurmi said it as well. Jurors can get doxxed. Of course, they can get doxxed. I was just saying, I think that in this case, I was thinking more about people that on the jury that are kind of there because they want to make money off of this. I mean, think about a book they could write after being on this jury, and so that is also an interesting thought, I guess, who really just are there for the fame. But Afton, I did not see any interaction among Dr. Bodden, one of Karen Reed's supporters, and police. Please fill me in on that. I did not see that. And what we heard today, I think at the beginning of jury selection, is that I forget which, there were law students from maybe Harvard or Boston University. I can't remember which one, that were actually volunteering to help the defense out with everything. So I was like, wow, you're right. This is becoming really, really big if it wasn't already. Oh, wait, Michael Bryant. Okay, I didn't hear any of this. I have no idea. You'll have to fill me in. And you find it so weird that he sits in the back of all the hearings and you can see him making faces. Sorry, who are you?
It's talking about Turtle Boy.
Oh, you're talking about, okay. I mean, I think it was, they called at random, or they put all the names in a hat, so to speak, for the media box. And I think, I don't know if you guys know, when I went to the trial last year, if you're not sitting in the courtroom, you are in this media room, which is like the most depressing room ever. And you might as well just watch it from home because there's really no point in being in this media room. It's like super quiet, it's awkward, and it's boring.
Well, so this process, though, like this one of the things I wanted to say. So if it does take 3 weeks, it's exhausting for the lawyers. Just so everybody understands, you're asking people the same series of questions, trying to get this voir dire process is to seek the truth, right? And you're trying to find out if a juror has a particular bias or a particular bend that's not so far that it could be good for you, and it's not going to create the prosecution to knock this particular person out, or this person isn't a complete nut job, right? So that process it's boring, okay? You have to find ways to kind of entertain yourself through that process. It gets terribly monotonous, but you cannot rush through it, because these are the folks. There's Judge Cannoni, who's making the issues on the law decisions. They're going to make the ultimate decisions on Karen Reed's guilt or innocence. So the next question is, what are you looking for, and who is going to be someone that can raise their hand and say, I didn't hear anything about this case? So those are the two questions I always get. How are you going to find someone that didn't hear about the Karen Reed case that's going to end up a juror, or the Koberger case, for example? And I always remind people, that's not the standard. The fact that you know something about the case will not, by in and of itself, eliminate you. The question is, have you formed an opinion with regard to Karen Reed's guilt or innocence, or the corruption or conspiracy of the police that is so fixed you cannot change your mind and will disregard the instructions of the court and won't pay attention? That's the standard. And there are people out there that already feel very strongly one way or another that can't put it aside. But there are people who will say, of course not. I will follow the instructions. And there may be people that want to get on there and make money or write a book.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Hopefully after the case.
Yes. And Kirk Nurmi and we discussed part of this last week. And it's good to be reminded of that. You can hear about the trial. You can hear about Karen Reed. I mean, and John O'Keefe. You don't need to live underneath a rock. But it's like you said, you just can't be set in your ways. You can't have already formed an opinion that you're stuck on. But I think this is interesting, Afton. I mean, we do have the buffer zone that we saw last time, and I can't remember. I think it was something like 500 feet or something like that. But this is going to get real out there. I have a feeling it's going to get pretty intense. So this does not surprise me that a cop ripped up a Free Karen Reed sticker. I'm not surprised at all. Hi, Carrie. And also, Kirk, we were discussing the juror that joined the defense team, Victoria George, and how Kirk was thinking that she is most likely going to be very helpful in the jury selection since she took part. Do you agree with that, or what do you think? Because she has no experience.
First of all, I see that's a mind game, I think, for the most part. But yeah, she took part, but everybody who had court TV watched it. I mean, so like they sat in the same seat she did. In fact, they saw more than the jury did, and she never deliberated. So she really can't give any insight into what happened in the first trial. So that is just that's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. This is her 15 minutes or whatever. I get she wants to help the defense. It's telling that somebody who sat as a juror feels that strongly. But at the same time, she didn't have any special purview other than this is a brand new jury. It's not the same people. It's not the same prosecutor. So much has changed. You think, what has changed in this short amount of time? Well, the defense has beefed up its lawyers. Okay. You have Alessi, who's a new part of the case. You have Victoria George, who's part of the case. But Hank Brennan is now the prosecutor, who is a defense attorney by trade, and it was appointed. So all of that has changed. The dynamic has changed. Very important ruling from Judge Cannone yesterday, curbing the ability of the defense to have third-party liability or third-party guilt put upon the younger Albert. So you have Brian Albert and Brian Higgins you could still accuse of or make certain statements about, maybe. If you look at the judge's ruling, it's a big maybe. But
right, they need actual proof to say this is why. And I mean, I think that also for opening statements, right? I don't think the defense, this is me personally, I don't think they should come out swinging with Karen Reed has been framed by these people. I really don't. I think they should come out and say, Karen Reed didn't do this. You're going to see why, because of these, experts and based on this investigation and lead investigator who had all this bias. I think that's how they grab the jury personally. And as far as, Brennan goes, I was discussing this with Kirk because I was a little confused, with the docuseries, the most recent one she did, Karen Reed. She said a lot of weird things, right? I was just like, why are you talking so much? This is odd. And Kirk was kind of like, well, he can't just say this out of nowhere. Because I'm thinking like Hank Brennan can get up there, and this is just me being an idiot, and start reading from a transcript of what she said. When she said, oh, I plucked a piece of glass out of his nose and all this stuff. He can't do that. He's got to work it in somehow with whatever's going on during the trial, whoever's on the stand. So, I was like, man, I felt like they had a lot to work with here, the CW this time because of the docs, but maybe not.
Well, here's the thing. The defense is at a disadvantage in their opening. So if they get on if Alan Jackson gets up and starts naming names and developing this extensive conspiracy, the risk is he doesn't know what the judge is going to let in right now. It's a kind of an open question. She's going to see how the evidence shakes out, how the case develops in trial 2, as to whether or not the stuff against Albert and Higgins even come in. So for Jackson to get up early on now and make a statement about them and then not deliver, he loses credibility. He runs the risk of creating a major issue for his case if ultimately that stuff doesn't come in. So you have to walk that tightrope to maintain credibility, deliver on the promises. So his approach to this should be exactly what you said, and it will be exactly what you said. And more broad-based allusion to conspiracy and taking apart the investigation, the rush to go after Karen Reed, the huge holes in some of what the evidence may suggest or may not suggest. The next part is what Kirk originally said to you was that he can't just get up. Hank Brennan can't just get up and read a transcript of what Karen Reed said. Now, he may know that's coming in. He may say, you're going to hear Karen Reed said this, because he knows he's putting somebody on the stand that took that statement from her in the documentary and knows exactly what statement he's going to use. He can't just get up and read it. He can't testify, but he can certainly refer to it if he knows it's coming in his case in chief. I had a similar situation where, as I said, a reporter was my last witness who took a statement from a defendant who became a defendant. So I referenced, you're going to hear from this person who took a statement from the defendant and alluded to what was said. You have to be careful in an opening. An opening is like a movie trailer. It's basically saying, this is what you're going to see. And for prosecutors, we would say, the evidence will show, right? Mm-hmm. Bang, bang, bang. And you're building that credibility. You're saying, I'm going to show you this, this, and this. And as you're doing that, a juror who was paying close attention says, hey, Ferrantino promised me he was going to do this, and wouldn't you know it, he did it. That's how you build credibility.
Right. And Afton, this is interesting. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because I feel like they should have allowed this personally. I mean, I thought it I don't know, or should they? I don't know. What do you think? So Michael Easter is from the FBI, and the defense wanted him to come in and say basically what a crappy ass investigation this was, and here's why. And Judge Canone, she would not allow this. What do you think about that?
Well, because her position is an investigation is a subjective, not necessarily a scientific thing. You could have, what do they say? Like, another man's treasure is another man's garbage, right? Like, you could have a terrible investigation and get to the right result. So when you're getting somebody who is an expert like Michael Easter in investigating and opining on a particular investigation, it's not to say it's junk science, not to say Michael Easter doesn't know what he's talking about, but no two investigations are the same. So to apply that standard is a dangerous standard. And there's no real cases where that's come in the past that I'm familiar with that would allow an expert to say, this is the right. It's so subjective. It's not really a science. It's certainly not a perfect science. So, there's always going to be questions that should have been asked or remain unanswered in particular investigations. If you allow for experts to pick it apart that way, I think you're setting a bad precedent. What was Kirk's question, though?
He had said, back, Jarrett, who has better perspective on how evidence hits?
Who has better perspective? Oh, he's saying Victoria George, because she was a juror, would have better perspective. And I would say the only thing in response, and that's a good point, but at the same time, we were all jurors because we all got to see the trial last time. I mean, I get she was sitting in a jury seat, but she's not imbued with any, other than the fact that she's a lawyer, imbued with any special knowledge because she served as a juror. It gives her perspective. I get it. But to me, I think it's a psychological game they're playing with Brennan.
Yeah, I mean, could be. And, I was thinking about this as well. It's kind of like and I keep going back to the docuseries and stuff, when Karen's doing all this talking, and it sounds kind of like the director is doing a better job of interviewing her than the police ever did, because there were certain things we'd never heard before. And maybe that's because what am I saying? It's not because they can get Karen at a later time, but, I know she was very emotional, and she was, had to be admitted to the hospital the morning of John's death. But it just seems like, doesn't that also make the Commonwealth look bad, where it's like, they never asked her any of these questions, and here she is being charged with second-degree murder?
Well, yeah, here's the thing. One thing I promised you last week or the week before last, I was going to watch the documentary, and I did. Yeah. Here's what I never really thought about, and maybe it's obvious to our viewers and listeners out there. This was originally viewed as a drunk woman hits a guy who happens to be a cop. He falls down in the grass. Everybody thinks we'll get there. Eventually we'll get there. And this thing becomes a murder prosecution. So when you're looking at this through the eyes of the Commonwealth, they didn't see it from the end. They were dealing with what they thought was a bad accident, a lot of people drinking, somebody's dead, former cop or a cop is dead. And then it blows up to this bigger thing where everything is microanalyzed. So looking at it from their original perspective, I kind of get it, but it left a lot of things unsaid, unanswered and unasked, if that's even a word, which is why Karen Reed, who was dying to explain every little thing, okay, did so in the documentary. But I got to say this, on a human level, and this isn't a comment on her guilt or innocence, but as a person, I find it very hard to warm up to her. She is, to me, very cold. And I get that she's angry. I get that, but one thing was when she said, did I hit him? I could have hit him. Remember that? And all of a sudden she's hook, line, and sinker on this conspiracy theory. She clearly didn't like most of these people to begin with. She doesn't present well, which is amazing to me that she has this rally of support, because she's just not a warm person. And that's not and again, she may very well be, it's just how she comes across in interviews and things of that nature. But we've had a lot of time to observe her. And I've kind of been in that business. I observe people and I just get a cold feeling from her. And I think she's in trouble this time.
Well, it's interesting because I have spoken to people who really support her, who really feel like she is innocent. And they have said those exact words. They were just like, she is tough to like. She's not super likable in this. And I understand that she probably thought she'd be found innocent when she did this documentary. And that's why she kept talking and talking and talking. And I was just kind of like, you should probably stop.
And I love the war room. I love the fact that I've had those war rooms. I love those. It's the most fun you're going to have as a prosecutor other than the trials. The war room is so much fun and it's emotional and it's a bond that really is special and unique. I love Yannetti. I think he's my kind of person. Jackson, I think, comes across as also cold. I've dealt with a lot of lawyers like Alan Jackson. Great lawyer. This is not lawyer hating. I think the guy does a great job. Like 0 F's given, man. He's fearless, but at the same time, he's not very likable. And that stuff is, I'm sorry, as a juror, you're going to want to cheer and like the people you're dealing with and observing. They come across as very crass and very cold. And and again, for whatever it's worth, they don't pay me for my assessment of human emotion, but that stuff plays. That's exhibit A in there. It's a huge factor.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, Alan Jackson is, like you said, he's an incredible lawyer. He's amazing. Yannetti does seem to have this, he's got a genuine thing about him. I feel like he's like your next door neighbor that you see every morning and you have a conversation with. Whereas Alan Jackson does have that sort of LA flashy thing going on, but it is what it is. And so maybe David Yannetti will resonate more with the jurors and Alan Jackson will pull some strategic shit like he did with, I thought he did such an incredible job of questioning witnesses during the first trial. So, I'm ready for that. But, the fact is
my problem isn't that he's flashy. I understand. Flashy's one thing. What I don't like is smarmy.
Right.
That's what I worry about. I think sometimes his exchanges with the judge and some of the stuff could come across that way. That's all.
Yeah. The thing is, I have to say, I do enjoy some of the clips when what was it, a couple weeks ago when he's like, I have 2 words, do it. It's funny. It shouldn't be funny. I get it. It's a murder trial and nothing is funny about it, but just those little things make it, I don't know. It's just crazy. These trials are almost like a soap opera at this point.
Well, they are. And that's good lawyering though, Lauren. That's good. You remember those things. And it doesn't all come down to one-liners, but if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. Jackson saying do it. Those are the moments that you're looking for. As a litigant at the tip of the spear, you're looking for something. You get an opportunity where you're there and you could just respond to something that comes up. Counterpunching is huge. President Trump is extremely effective counterpuncher, in debates and things of that nature. It's a big deal in trials.
Yeah. And going back to, there was a comment about the butt dials and people getting rid of their phones, and going back to the witnesses. I mean, look, I'm not here to say that the witnesses are murderers, that they're killers. I'm really not. But what I will say, and this has always been my opinion, and this is my opinion, take it for what it is it seems like they were hiding something. And this is not an invitation to go harass witnesses, whatever. I just feel like throughout the trial, certain things we saw, and I'm not even talking about, let's say, the Google search, the Haas long to die in the cold. I'm just talking about the getting rid of your phone, Brian Higgins, the SIM card, all the butt dials, and also the language around how they spoke about John O'Keefe, who is supposed to be their friend. Does not mean anyone is guilty, but from Jen McCabe's 911 call, where John is supposed to be her very good friend for a long time, and she says something like, I'm paraphrasing, a man is dead in the snow, or there's a man dead in the snow. And then when they have that group text, and either Matt McCabe or one of the guys says the guy never went in the house, I'm just like, this is odd language. The little things about and we can argue
it's
this
hard
all
to know
day
how
back
well they all knew each other, but like Higgins and Albert, they appeared guarded. And that's,
yeah, of course.
God knows what. Look, Higgins could have had something on his phone he wanted. I love how they say Brian Higgins, ATF agent, like they say immediately, like every single time they had. And but he had something. Who knows?
Or he's walking out of the Canton police on the phone after he said he went to bed. It's like,
right.
It doesn't mean that they killed John O'Keefe, of course. It just means, what are you hiding? What happened?
And it doesn't
Did something
help.
else happen? You know what I mean? Like I've had cases where, we thought somebody possibly murdered somebody, but it turns out they were hiding some kind of sexual gay escapade they're about to go on because they were closeted and stuff like that. Like, it's weird. It's weird that it just seems like something is not right. And again, people argued, Brian Albert never came out of the house because of XYZ. And I think in the doc, one of the defense attorneys is like, well, if he did come out, he would be accused of this. No, I don't think so. I personally thought it was weird that he never
front yard.
Like, yeah,
it's his front yard.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
So look, I think none of that is good for the prosecution. Okay, it certainly didn't help. So when you take, like, here is the sandwich that Brendan has been handed. Okay. Mm-hmm. You got the Proctor problem. You got the Higgins and Albert problem. You got a shoddy investigation problem. You have the the original trooper expert problem. Like, these folks cannot. Now, here's what you say. I get this is a brand new trial and everybody knows that. Yep. But you can't come in and totally wipe the slate of what you said in the previous trial. What you said can and will be used against you if you change your position in the subsequent case. So remember that. You're kind of stuck with much of what was said and done on particular witnesses. Now, what I have said since the second we knew Karen Reed trial 2 was coming, the DA better get themselves a biomechanical expert. Okay. And then,
not Trooper Paul. You don't think
everybody said there's no biomechanical expert that's going to agree. And sure enough, I always said they brought a knife to a gunfight. Adam Lally, with all due respect, I thought he did a fine job. I think he's a good prosecutor, but you need a great prosecutor for this. And you need someone who understands you fight fire with fire. You don't go in there and do it by the book. You got to go. Did you ever see the movie New Jack City? I'm really dating myself.
A long time ago. Yeah.
Said it takes a New Jack cop to take down a New Jack gangster. You got to rise to that level sometimes. And a prosecutor like Lally, I know dozens of them. Okay. Mm-hmm. They are capable people. But when it comes to a big dance like this, they need to be down in the office assisting behind the scenes. You need flash, you need might, you need strategic chess players.
Yeah, no, totally. I personally didn't think Lally did a good job, but I'm not a lawyer, and I've never, you obviously know much better than I do. But yeah, And I think that something else Kirk and I talked about is the fact that the prosecution is definitely going to be stronger this time around because they know what to expect. And they have someone like Hank Brennan who, you know, he's done some questionable things, I guess, but he's also doing his job, and he is 10 times better than Lally at this point. So just saying. And again, I'm not saying any witness is guilty of anything. I just really am interested to know if we will figure out more as to what went down that night, if anyone kind of will own up to any conversations they had after the fact, just to clear their name, I guess, if that is possible. You know what I mean? Because it's like if you have these calls being made between these guys and you see Brian Higgins leaving the station on the phone and they said they fell asleep, well, we know now that didn't happen.
And I got to say this isn't going to be very I believe Jennifer McCabe. I do. I believe her.
About that she didn't make the
I believe her testimony.
Yeah.
I believe her testimony. I believe she's angry.
I'm not even talking about her though. Like I don't even
But I'm just saying, like, of all these people that were in the house, you know, and I got to be honest with you. I don't think the last jury bought the conspiracy theory. I think they just couldn't get their head around the fact that the ARCA experts crushed Paul. I mean, that's what it was. Nobody said, "Hey, I think Albert did it." They said, "You didn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt because the ARCA bros took your expert apart at the limbs." Yeah. That's what happened here.
Yeah, no, and because I think because Trooper Paul was so bad, he could not explain how the vehicle hit John O'Keefe. If you recall, some of his answers on the stand were like, "It just did," and I was like,
"You understand? Here's how this plays out. The first conversation when you're prepping for trial in that matter is Lally and Paul are in a room, and he's asking him. He's cross-examining Paul." We don't just, it doesn't work like this. Yeah. "Trooper Paul, what's your CV? Here's what you're going to testify to. Thanks. We'll see you at the trial." You go through that process with him. How that was allowed to happen, and rewatching it in the doc, he was very weak. And you have to understand a witness's shortcomings. That's not to say he doesn't know anything about his job. He's not able to go as high as a biomechanical expert would go. That's what you need. You need to understand. I'm looking at a case right now. This trial was in 2005, and the prosecution on a very circumstantial case, and the case is the death of Bill McGuire, the 3 suitcase bodies that washed up in Virginia. The prosecution recognized the limitations of their police experts and secured the right forensic people that helped them make their case. That's what you have to do. You got to understand how this is going to play out in front of a jury. You're not going to get the benefit of the doubt, and Trooper Paul is not going to be given the freedom to say what he wants to say beyond his expertise.
Right, and I get that. And you know, Afton brought up a good point here. The jurors, or the one juror that Turtle Boy interviewed, kind of said that he didn't think that ARCA was that great because he thought, or not that, but he just thought it was an expert that the defense had hired to sort of say what they wanted them to. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. You know what I mean? Like,
especially since Jackson bent over backwards to make the point that he didn't hire them. So you never know.
He did not hire them. That's the fun. Yeah, you're right. He did say that. And so it is weird that they kind of were like, they just disregarded him saying that. Yeah, but you know, it's interesting because I've never cared. I shouldn't say, actually, no, I've never cared about the Jen McCabe alleged Google search. I really haven't. That hasn't necessarily mattered to me during this investigation, whether it happened or it didn't, because it's like, you know, whatever. I found all the other behavior to be just weird. And then the investigation. And then again, the experts not proving anything to me.
Ironically, the first time we ever spoke doing interviews or a show, that was one of the first things you ever asked me. And I said that, understanding Google timestamps way above my pay grade. I do know that they do not often correspond to the date and time that they're made and are easily explainable. And I likened it to surveillance cameras, which in stores, which are often wrong. You'll have the right minutes, but you'll have the wrong hour. So
Right.
That was never a huge issue for me. And I don't think it was a huge issue for the jury. I mean, you would
No,
have to be a cold person why would they allow him to just dump him out in the front lawn, let him die? And let me just check how long.
Yeah, I know. It sounds insane. It sounds stupidly insane, which is why I've just been like, I don't even, that has never been part of my, I guess, part of the evidence or the non-evidence that I have just, taken into consideration here. But anyway, if you want to we can, put a pin in this for now, because like you said, so just going back, the first trial took about 5 days for jury selection. So, I mean, I was thinking it would be double, maybe 10 days, but you think it probably be closer to 3 weeks, which it could be with,
into the third. There's a lot of lawyers in that room. They're going to drag. This thing's going to be a little bit painful. But, and again, we just said it's bigger. The sequels are always bigger. The budgets are bigger. There's more, more glitz and glamour this time around. And so it's going to take into week 3. I'd be surprised.
Yeah. So last year when the trial was going on, I would always pick up my kids from like camp or whatever, and I would have it on like on my phone, and I'd be listening, and they're always like, "What are you listening to? Why are you so glued to this?" And I had told them this morning when I was dropping them off, I'm like, "Remember that trial and they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, it's about to happen again. So I'm about to be glued to my phone again, picking you up and dropping you off everywhere." It's just crazy because I literally, my phone throughout the day, I had one AirPod in, and I was just always listening. And I'm just like, God, I feel like it was a lot, and I'm going to have to do that again. So,
well, I'm going to tell you this. Last time I wanted to stay as far away from this case. I was just annoyed with it. I'm watching it this time around. I've seen much of it at this point, but I'm going to be dialed in. I followed it. It's a locked room murder mystery. I'm anxious to see how it plays out.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, let's see. But for now, let's just transition over to Kansas moms, because there is a new filing, or I guess it's a few days old at this point, from Tad Cullum. And just quickly, it has been a year since Jillian Kelly and Veronica Butler were murdered, sadly, and their alleged killers have still not been brought to justice. And this case is one of the cases that Jarrett and I had been covering from the start, and it's a tough one. And I know how hard it's been on both of the women's families. We have personal relationships with them, and I think that we want to see this case. God, we want to see this case adjudicated. We want to see it go to trial. I'm ready, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not related to anybody, but it's so difficult. But there are 2 court dates coming up, or 2 defendants have court dates on April 16th, Tiffany and Tad, I believe. And I think there might be it might be Cole as well. I have to double check, but I'm going to pull up this filing, Jarrett, so you can go over this with us if you don't mind.
Sure.
And this is Tad's recent filing to get the judge recused, Judge Parsley, because, hold on, sorry. Oh, there it is. Because Judge Parsley, from what I understand, he represented Tiffany Adams in her divorce, which was 2011 or 2012. I'll pull this up. So yeah, if you just want to go through this and let me know your thoughts. I mean,
so
I
basically,
feel like this is a reach, but
well, look, I think his lawyers have to make this request. And the cool thing about that filing is it spells, I've done this. It's very difficult to ask a judge to recuse themselves, okay? Because you're saying to them, without saying to them, we don't think you could be fair and impartial. Now, when it comes to asking judges and talking about a potential conflict of interest, you could say to a judge, and I've said this, Judge, I don't doubt you're going to be fair. The problem is it has the air of impropriety. Okay, this particular relationship you have or have had creates an improper look for our case, and we can't have that. The defense can't have that. The cool thing about this filing is it cites the rule that you have to first raise this with the judge privately. And you say, Judge, we believe your prior relationship with Tiffany Adams, who is a co-defendant, okay, and her domestic situation, by the way, you represented her in her divorce. Her domestic situation is, once again, part and parcel of this case, maybe part of the defense, may involve information you became privy to as an attorney, okay, and your attorney-client privilege still stands. We believe that creates a conflict of interest that you cannot preside over this case, either the air of impropriety or you actually can't be fair. Now, it's a decision ultimately made by the very person. Think about that. If you do have somebody who's being unfair, and I'm not saying Judge Parsley's not, they have to be the ones that say, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to be fair. I'm going to recuse myself. Very difficult request to make, very difficult request to be granted.
Yes. I mean, I guess I'm just confused at why they are filing this now. They've known who the judge was for some time. I mean, maybe they did not realize that Tiffany, and I've said this before, like it's a small county. Everybody knows everybody. All the judges were once, private attorneys at one point, and people have, and I've said this too. I thought that the venue should have been changed a long time ago because of the district attorney. It hasn't been, but the judge wasn't necessarily, I guess, an issue for me. But that's, I don't know. It's just, it's weird. I just think it's, can you imagine at this point, like, for a venue
at this point, though, look, I think Tad is probably raising this issue with his lawyers. He's saying, this is BS. He represented Tiffany. He shouldn't be the judge on my case. Now, what would motivate that? Maybe Parsley's a harsh sentencer. Maybe Tad knows if I go in front of Parsley, he knows me. He's going to roll me. I'm in trouble here. I need another judge. I see this as an opportunity to get him off. Now, here's the problem. His attorneys, Tad's attorneys, have to make that request. They can't ignore it, because when this thing, even if Tad pleads, it could come back and haunt them down the road. They could say, look, we have letters where Cullum is raising this issue with you. Why didn't you ever at least bring it to the judge informally? So the other thing of why ask now, it's not too late to make that request, because there's been no real omnibus hearing, pretrial hearing on the merits of anything yet. So right now, it's like pure as the driven snow. You don't have all the pretrial litigation that we've had in Karen Reed, because everybody's positioned to plead guilty. All we're doing is extending the speedy trial rule. Judge Parsley has not ruled really on anything other than the habeas motions, which are throwaway motions.
Right. Yeah, no, because he was not the judge during the pretrial hearing. It was Judge Clark, A. Clark Jett. And just to correct something I said, the upcoming hearings, 4/16 is Tad, Tiffany, and Paul. 5/7 is Cole, and 5/14 is Cora. And I'm wondering at this point for 4/16, it's like, what? I mean, there's no way they're going to set a trial date or start looking at trial dates on 4/16, right? Or do you think they will?
They will.
Okay.
That doesn't mean there's going to be a trial. They could set a date. And one thing judges, they almost have to do, because they have to show that their dockets are moving, especially cases of this magnitude. You have to have, I always call it a red X on the calendar.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to have that, even if it's a BS date. You say, like, guys, January 15th, 2026, we're going. That's the day. So and then you work backwards from there. You start setting additional discovery deadlines, pretrial hearing dates. Everything works backwards from that date. So if you're going to plead, I would say this. I would say, Mr. Cullum, you've indicated that you may resolve this case. You have until this date to get it resolved. Doesn't mean you could hold him to it. He can come in the day of the trial or during the trial and plead.
sorry,
say,
when you say resolve, you mean take a plea and say, I plead guilty, I don't want to go to trial type of thing?
yes, yes.
Okay.
The judge could say, like, I'm strongly recommending, if you've searched yourself and reviewed the evidence and feel like you're going to resolve the case, I would recommend we all do that before the 4th of July. Okay. Let's not waste each other's time. Now, that doesn't mean they have to follow that, but that judges can certainly, the power of suggestion from the bench is there.
Right. And do you think there's any way on the 16th, or why do I keep saying, is it the 6th? I'm losing what I say. Yeah, I'm right. Okay. The 16th. God. Do you think there's any way on the 16th that they will, or let's say Tiffany, I have
She
trouble
could,
thinking.
but Tad
Yeah.
won't. Tad won't with that motion pending.
That's what I was thinking. Tad thinks he's getting off on this somehow. I really think that Tad thinks that because no one saw him with a knife, I think he's such an idiot that he doesn't realize all of the DNA that the OSBI probably has from the burial site, from the actual knife, from the clothes. I think he's such a moron that, like I said, he thinks he could somehow get off.
He just feels like he has nothing else to lose. And once everybody else pleads, in all likelihood, he's going to plead guilty. But he will, in my opinion, be the last to fall. Right.
So you think there could be a chance that Tiffany shows up, or, on the 16th and says, I want to plead guilty. Maybe there's life without parole on the table, not death. And
right.
That is a possibility.
I've seen it happen. In all likelihood, nothing could happen. They could go in there and just get that scheduling date. I mean, I've had conferences with multiple defendant murderers, multiple defendant homicide cases where you come in, is everybody getting discovery? How do we look? Clear your calendars for September, things of that nature. It's just an opportunity, again, to get everybody together, have everybody kind of assess where they are. And realistically, I mean, how else could a court of this size plan to conduct these trials? These trials are going to be extensive and long. So you have to find a block where you're going to schedule it too.
Right. And this is a random question, but the civil suits that we saw filed from Veronica's mother, making certain claims against Tiffany and against Tiffany Gleason, the therapist, those will not come into play at all. I'm assuming for the criminal trial. Is it possible that anything from a civil suit can be brought up at a criminal trial? Yes. And how would that?
I've had it happen. Yes. So
okay. How would that work?
Well, I've seen it happen where a victim files a claim for, remember, criminal is about putting somebody away, really simplified here, putting somebody in prison. Civil, for the most part, is about money. So I had a case where a person was violently attacked at a bar. They sued the bar, okay? And so when that person takes the stand, they would say, the defense attorneys are like, well, this is about money, isn't it? You filed this lawsuit. You're suing the bar. You think they're responsible for this. It doesn't help. It's not great. In the end, it'll work out. So there's that aspect of how it could come in. But here's how it could come in. When Tiffany tries to suggest, if she was taking the defense, I did this to save my grandchildren from being molested or abused. Mm-hmm. How the civil case comes in and say, wait a minute. You set the table for this. You got the counselor to say this. Look, like, isn't it true you're being sued and accused of it? So it could find its way in that way. It really goes to things that are at the very heart of what was the alleged motivation behind the killing. So the facts behind the civil case can find their way in, and issues in the civil case could find their way in. I had a case where a prisoner was killed inside of a state correctional facility. His family filed a civil lawsuit. The defense lawyers made sure they got that information in front of the jury to suggest, like, really, this is about money.
Yeah. And I have said this before. I always thought that the therapist should have been questioned extensively, and people at the hospital should have been questioned because of their protocol or lack of protocol. And listen, I think that the judge in the custody case should be questioned as well. Whatever. It's a whole mess. And I hope this goes to trial. So we can get a lot of this information. However, I don't want it to hurt the families if they would rather just, have them take some kind of plea deal. But I do kind of wish that Tiffany has her day in court and we could see all of this play out, because I do feel like there is a lot of evidence that works against Tiffany and works against all of the accusations that she's made against Veronica. Not that many people believe them at all, but if anyone did believe them, then, this could hopefully help clear Veronica's name in that aspect.
One of the things in our Crime Nation episode was about Kansas moms. Many of my friends who should be watching this show, who clearly are not, but by asking this question, but did watch that, they said, why did she lose custody of her kids? And that was I would say 10 people asked me that question. And I said, it was part of a setup. And they were like, oh, when they heard that. So, they looked at that and said, what's really going on here? What aren't we being told? And that's a sensible question. But again, it was on about 10 different people asked me that question.
Yeah, everybody wants to know that. And look, I'm not going to pretend like I was there and I know everything, but I've said this before, all of the evidence that I've seen and the people that I've spoken to. And then, I'll just leave it there. And it's tough. It's not something that can be explained on a show like Crime Nation or even doing this right now, without the case being adjudicated. It's tough. It's really tough. And I know that there have been a lot of people, I think, in the area who also want to speak out about certain things that they might have seen, certain things that they might know, but they don't trust the system, Jarrett. And that is devastating.
I get it. Just some of what's being said in that civil lawsuit and the extremes these folks took this to, and their integration into the boards and the hospital and the courts, it's concerning. So we're going to continue to watch it, though. I ultimately think, here's my prediction on Kansas moms: everybody's going to plead guilty.
And no trial?
No. Inevitably, I hope I'm wrong. No, I hope I'm right. I don't necessarily want to see a trial, but if I'm wrong, I will be surprised. Based on what I'm seeing in these filings, I think Tad is having a temper tantrum about Parsley.
Yeah. No, he is. Do you think there's any way, though, that this is granted and they get a new judge?
No, he's already turned down. He's already said no to that. Like, he's already said informally no. He knew this filing was coming. I don't foresee it's not necessarily a problem that he represented Tiffany. In my opinion, though, the fact that Tiffany's domestic issues factor so prominently in this case, that gives me a little concern. But it's ultimately up to the judge. And the only way that could be revisited is if it goes up to an appellate court. So,
And the thing is, like, I think that, as you know, most of our viewers are very informed, but I mean, if you go to trial, right, and you're convicted of murder, you're going to appeal. You have the right to appeal. You have a certain period of time. So if, Tad is convicted of murder and, Judge Parsley presided over this despite, this motion, it's not like he wasn't already going to appeal his murder conviction.
Right,
like,
but the thing is, the judges are guided by that. Like, it's not enough that Tad's asking the question. The judge knows, look, somebody else is going to look at this down the road and say, Judge, like, that's why you have to write your opinions and allow them to be supported by good precedent. Like, that's why, because you're, number one, trying to do the lawful thing, and two, insulating that opinion from an appellate judge who's saying you got it wrong because of X, Y, and Z. It's not enough just to flippantly disregard what Tad's asking. Is my point.
Right.
So, But anyway, I think they all know that another judge, just like Karen Reed, this latest thing on the third-party guilt decision that she made is going to be examined if Karen's convicted by the appellate courts in Massachusetts, which at this point are probably so sick of this case.
I know. It's so true. Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, I feel like, yeah, we kind of went in deep with both of these cases today. And I'm not sure if I thought we were going to, or we were just going to touch on them and then kind of move on to whatever else. But no, this has been really informative for me
There is
personally.
some other stuff going on.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. I mean, right before
So
we got on
the
here.
latest, as we predicted in Kohlberger, was as the trial approaches, you're going to have all this pretrial litigation, and there's just been some compelling stuff that has come out. Number one, he happened to purchase the K-bar knife, and he had the balaclava mask that was drawn by the witness. He purchased that too. Again, so the noose is getting tighter around the neck of Brian Kohlberger.
And that selfie, oh my God, that's chilling. That selfie is disgustingly chilling.
First of all, anybody who wears their shirt buttoned up to that extent, the guy is so weird. He's another one. I mean, he just gives serial killer vibes. I'm sorry. And by the way, here's another thing we predicted that we were right about. Mm-hmm. I said, although the autism filing was for the guilt phase or the penalty phase of the trial, it will find its way into the courtroom on the guilt phase to explain his odd behavior, which is incessantly cleaning his car, wearing gloves, taking garbage out to the neighbors, his odd social interactions. All of those things are they're going to back all that into explaining it away. Here's the problem. Yeah. You got so much to explain away in this case. With every passing day, another nugget comes out. Like, if you're Hansel and Gretel lost in the woods, right, and you're looking for these breadcrumbs to find your way home, they all lead to Brian Kohlberger. Phone, car, mask, knife, DNA. And the phone evidence, the latest in the phone evidence, way worse for him. They're putting him within meters of the house. So that's what's 100%. Coming out soon. Yeah, that's going to be developed much further. So
this is all, I mean, like I said, I think he's guilty, as do you, based on what we've seen so far. So this just adds to it, this evidence. And quickly, Luigi Mangione, Pam Bondi, would like the U.S. attorney to seek the death penalty there. Look, I'm no Mangione fan. You know that. I'm just like, really? You really want to seek death for this? I don't think he would get death personally. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, she didn't. This just broke, so I don't know what. As someone who's handled death penalty cases, I don't know what the aggravator would be. I think it's probably the making of the fake gun, possessing it.
You said premeditated, stalking him. He's a father of two. Are
those aggravating circumstances in support of death, though? I mean, obviously they're important things, but the aggravating circumstances are statutorily set forth: multiple victims, prior convictions, particularly heinous crime, torture. These are the ones that you typically see. So I don't know what Pam Bondi has not identified which aggravator in particular they want to apply. So it's hard to assess whether or not I think it's appropriate. Here's the thing. I think this one is, like Reed, polarizing, clearly. I think that if you want justice for Brian Thompson, you don't need the death penalty in the case. I think the volume goes way up. I don't think they'll get it on a young man like that. I just don't think they'll get it.
That's kind of how I was thinking too. I was like, all right, Bondi, just show us the Epstein files already, right? Like, get out of here. Right. Sorry.
I also think, and believe me, I'm no Mangione supporter. I think it's crazy that people are supporting him and what he did. I think it was an act of cowardice. Like I said, it never stops. If you start supporting that kind of vigilanteism, it's not even that. It's not even it's like extreme anti-corp. I don't know what it is, but it never stops. And inevitably you become the oppressor. So I don't see, I think he should absolutely be prosecuted and sent away for the rest of his life. But I don't know if his life should hang.
No, I feel the same way. I just saw that and I was like, ugh, Bondi wants attention again. No, I'm just kidding. Kind of kidding. But anyway, Jarrett, this has been great. as usual. I hope we can do this again our normal time next Wednesday. I like doing Wednesdays in the middle of the week with coffee. That's always my favorite. So hopefully we can go back to that again, depending on your schedule.
I have to go try on a suit that I ordered off these guys that do not speak English. I have no idea how much the suit's going to cost. I have to go meet them now to try it on. I think I might be in trouble here.
Okay, we'll take some pictures. I'm sure that our chat would love to see pictures of you in a suit.
That's where I'm headed today. So.
Okay, well, like I said, we'll be back next week, of course. Hopefully we'll be back on Wednesday morning, but I'll keep you guys posted, most likely on X or wherever you follow me. I'll have a note. But thanks again.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everybody.
And for watching. Bye, Jarrett.
Happening. You're trying to figure out ultimately what is.
It's still a mystery as to why it took them